Welcome to Brute Facts. Tonight I have a special guest, Dr. Robert Price. He is a double PhD in systematic theology and theological studies. He is a fun guy. I have watched a lot of his interviews, and he guests on a lot on Myth Vision, and he is fun to have around. I guarantee you're going to love this show. Welcome, Dr. Price. How are you doing?
Oh, doing great. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm making it. I think after kind of rescheduling a couple times with you and I both, we finally made this thing happen. So tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of what you like to do for fun these days.
I find being grossly overcommitted is lots of fun. I'm editing various fiction anthologies and periodicals. I edit the Lovecraft oriented publication Crypt of Cthulhu, and another more general horror fiction magazine, Eldritch Tales. And then there's the scholarly Journal of Higher Criticism. And that's there are more of those than the others these days. I am editing, I'm bringing to a conclusion a series of Lovecraftian fiction anthologies I've been working on for 30 years, I guess.
Wow.
And let's see. I'm writing books on the Bible and theology. I'm just proofing the text of my book, Judaizing Jesus. I hope to finish that up this evening and send it back to the publisher. And planning on doing a whole bunch of research for another book called The Christ, Myth, and Gospel Christology. And what else? My wife, Carol, and I are reviving our old discussion group, Heretics Anonymous, as a video thing that with Derek's help. And we've done a couple of them so far, and they're going to post them very soon. And I'm thinking of offering some courses online, and I have a feeling I'm forgetting other stuff, but also customizing action figures naturally. And so I'm having a great old time.
You are a busy man. That's no wonder you got 2 PhDs. You can't sit still. That's so how you were born Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah.
I'm from Memphis, so I'm well acquainted. And then you moved to New Jersey. How did you end up as you were a Baptist minister, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how long were you a minister for?
Officially for about 6 years. I pastored First Baptist Church of Montclair, New Jersey, where Harry Emerson Fosdick decades before had his first pastorate. And then that sort of fell apart. And the church had something like 800 members way back in the 20s when Fosdick was around. But over the decades, it had gradually bled down to a few hundred, and by the time I came, there was just a very small congregation that didn't even meet in the main sanctuary anymore. But I did pastor there for 6 years, and then after I left that, for another 6, I had an informal living room congregation. And that was really a lot of fun. We had great discussions after my sermon, and so I did that for a good while. But
Okay.
one thing people get confused about me, they think that since I was a Baptist minister, I was a fundamentalist. Well, actually, I was for a dozen years, beginning when I was 10 or 11 years old. But by the time I sought ordination, I had already gone to the left end of the theological spectrum and was a big fan of Rudolf Bultmann and Paul Tillich and others. And so I had I was no longer orthodox in any way, though I continue to respect that tradition and still do now. But people seem to picture me as, fundamentalist one day, and then whammo, I had the reverse Damascus Road experience, but that wasn't really the case. I was, very unorthodox. But I found an interesting thing that that in no way hampered preaching, because I figure, what are you going to say in a sermon? Are you going to give people a theology lesson? Are you going to do an exegetical exposition? I don't think so. I mean, I had study groups on the side and so on, but people want motivation and insight and so forth. And similarly, I found in counseling and visiting people in the hospital, people were not desperate for theoretical stuff. They wanted a listening ear and some perspective and advice. And so I wasn't an evangelical anymore, but didn't really need to be, nor did I try to counsel them based on demythologizing and so on. What is the point of that? In fact, I would say the same for any Orthodox, like Calvinist or Arminian. I doubt if they want you to stand up there in the pulpit and give them theology lessons. Maybe I'm wrong. But if it's just going to be cheerleading for your team, what's the point? Right. And I didn't see any need to do that. I just preached what I could, and it seemed to be helpful to people.
Yeah, that's Bultmann. He was the German kind of skeptic, kind of a demythologizing Christianity kind of thing with the miracles and things. I've read some of his stuff. He was a pretty smart guy, that's for sure. And I think the fundamentalist thing is, because fundamentalism has that effect on people. It you go from this extreme black and white world and this, idea of faith. It's like an epistemic position, and you just accept things. I was kind of the opposite. I know what you mean about the messages. My family, I went to a Southern Baptist when I was younger, and they loved the compository preaching, I think. Expository, there you go. I wanted the meat. I wanted them to teach me and tell me. And it's funny, you'd mentioned moving to the left early on. How many people get blamed for being a liberal Christian when you're really taking Christ at his words? You don't have this dogma. You don't have this, cheerleading like you were talking about for your team. And everybody's like, oh, well, he's just a liberal Christian. And it's like, no, I'm going to love people. That's, that's why I started this show, is to bring on a lot of my agnostic atheist friends. And because there's too many people out there that the church itself is harmed. So what started to lead you down the road of the mythicism, I guess? Would you say that what kind of mythicist would you identify as?
Well, I finally came to the conclusion, which when I first heard of the idea, thought was crazy, that most likely there had been no historical Jesus. And I would have said what a lot of people still say, oh, that's like being a Holocaust denier and so forth. Well, I know there was a Holocaust because my father, McNair Price, was in Patton's Third Army when they liberated the Dachau concentration camp. So I don't have any room for doubt on that. But with the Jesus question, it has to do with a bunch of interlocking issues on how you weigh evidence and what sort of literature you're reading when you read the gospel narratives. Are they more like parables or legends? They're all edifying. That's why any of them are still preserved. But all of these things made me question, what am I really reading here? And it was apologetics that drove me in this direction to begin with, because I thought, I read all these InterVarsity Christian Fellowship books and other ones like Josh McDowell and so forth. And it mattered a great deal to me if you could make a good case or even prove that, oh yeah, Jesus existed. The Gospels are eyewitness accounts. Jesus did miracles. He rose from the dead. He claimed he was God, and therefore whatever he said goes. And the more I got into that, I realized, I can't just give a sales pitch. I can't just use any old argument unless I myself feel I would be convinced by it if I were on the other side. Right. Would this really seem cogent to me? Because if it won't, well, then I'm dishonest if I try to convince somebody else with it. And so the more I got into all of that, verifying and proving Christianity, the more doubts assailed me, partly because that approach, that of a scholarly weighing and so on, is antithetical to the kind of faith that they considered a virtue. Like you're no longer believing by willpower, but you now have gone on to the unstable ground of probabilistic argument. And what are you going to do? Say, well, it's highly probable that Jesus was raised from the dead, or and that kind of thing. Right. Did Jesus claim to be God? Well, depending on how you read it, right. Well, that's, they say the gospel is good news, not good views. Well, right. When you're getting into apologetics, you're making it into good views. And once you do that, you can't really help but notice that they're not as good as you thought. You can right. never make dogmatic claims based on weighing evidence and all that with something from 2,000 years ago. Yeah. And so my whole stance changed, and I still thought there was a historical Jesus and that he said most of the stuff in the Gospels. But the closer I looked at that, my second PhD, by the way, was in New Testament. And so with that kind of scrutiny, I was surprised to find myself less and less confident that any of this stuff was history or even intended to be history. And so I found myself at the surprising crossroads where I had to decide, look, evangelical faith led me to this consuming interest in understanding the Bible. But now I find I find it's not that simple anymore. So what am I going to do? Stick with the creed or stick with the Bible and study it in a way that makes sense? And I never thought I'd come to that dilemma, but I decided, well, I just got to go with the inquiry and the study of it. And that's the tragedy of biblical literalism, where I try to show this in a book I have coming out called When Gospels Collide, where I show that a whole bunch of contradictions that are well known between one gospel and another. And I'm trying to show these contradictions are not stupid blunders by incompetent writers, nor is anybody trying to pull the wool over your eyes. There are complex editing and redaction going on to reapply material and to make it speak with a new voice, and you can get much more out of it that way. But if you insist, no, it's all got to somehow be homogenized, you're cheating yourself and the Bible.
Yeah, I actually agree completely.
Mm,
I think biblical lyricism, being, literal about it, the way that a lot of Western evangelicals do, they're missing the deep, the deep theological messages that are there. And me, I've been studying a lot in Second Temple Judaism
mm,
and Jewish theology and metaphysics, and I'm starting to get to garner a whole new kind of message from the New Testament. A lot of things that
mm,
seem to be just, the concept that we have about, what certain things mean or say is just
mm,
wrong. And then a
mm,
lot of them, it's missing really the meat of what's there, because
mm,
it's got to be in cultural context. We got to
mhm,
know who the people were. um,
mhm.
so I had read somewhere that you at one time were, I don't know if it was they quoted, or someone said it, that you were a Christian atheist, or is that?
Yeah, which has a kind of very specific meaning. I derive that from Thomas Altizer's book, The Gospel of Christian Atheism, where he sort of takes off on Nietzsche's Death of God, that it's not just atheism. It's not that you say there is no God, it's just a mistake, but rather that God is dead. And what does that mean? Well, it has a kind of postmodern reference saying there is no central bedrock of truth or meaning. Meaning has to be in the eye of the beholder, but that is joyful knowledge. It's not a kind of nihilism of despair.
Mhm.
And it's and the and Altizer shows how he interprets the crucifixion as God pouring out the sacred into the profane, so that the world itself, in an almost pantheistic way,
Mhm.
shows the divine if you have eyes to see it. It's much like the Mahayana Buddhist idea that if you want to find nirvana, it's
Mhm.
in samsara. You just have to snap out of it and see what's really there. And
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I find that it was like Spinoza. Some people said that he was an atheist, and others said no, he's God intoxicated. Well, how could it be both? Well, Spinoza said there indeed is no personal God. That God must be the infinite, and you can't have what Francis Schaeffer said, an infinite personal God. It's a contradiction in terms. So what is God? He said the divine nature within everything. There's not also some guy somewhere. And the Christian atheism is sort of like that. There are differences, but it says that it sees a dialectic of the sacred and the profane, much like Buddhism does. And
Right.
plus, I love the symbols of Christianity. I love the Bible. I've often gone to church and loved the liturgy and all that. There's great, great beauty and profundity in it, even when I find I can no longer believe traditional doctrines, like the
Right.
doctrine of the atonement makes no sense to me morally or any other way. It's not that I hate it, it's not that I sneer at it, but it seems to me incoherent, and
Right.
yet I respect the tradition.
Yeah. So it seems like it's more kind of pragmatic. Um, and just like you, I mean, I I'm a probabilist in my epistemology, and I'm not certain that God exists, and I'm not certain that Christ is God, but I do, like you were talking about, I love the beauty of the literature. Even if I stopped being a Christian tomorrow, I would still study the Bible,
Mm,
because it's it is, we don't have anything else like the collection, and spanning such a broad history and people. It came from and oral people who painted pictures with words. So
Mm.
it's so beautiful when we can step back and take off that, fundamentalist, literalist approach to it and look at what it is. It's literature. We have to look at the the literary devices that are used, and put it in the context of how they would have viewed these things. So yeah, I'm with you all the way on that. That's definitely a respectable approach to it, and I'm glad to hear that that you do, because there's a lot of Christians who don't understand the amount of like you said, profundity that we can get from it. You, even if you don't believe a lot of the things, there's still a lot, just looking like in the Old Testament, Proverbs. I mean, it may not have been God breathed words, but there's a lot of good wisdom in Proverbs. I think, we can garner, a lot of wisdom from different things that are there. So
yeah, like the whole nature of a proverb is it doesn't matter who said it. The thing is, it's the kind of thing where it rings true and you say, wow, I never thought of that, but that's the way to live, or that's the way to conduct yourself. It rings true. You don't have to take it on faith as if some prophet said, okay, God wants you to walk on your hands every Thursday from 1 to 3 in the afternoon. Huh? Well, okay. Proverbs are not like that. It's like cast out the scorner and dissension will go out. Oh, yeah. Or a soft answer turneth away wrath. Son of a gun, that's right. Why didn't I see that?
right.
And that's wisdom. It rings true. And if it doesn't, watch out, Jim Jones, here we come.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's one of the dangers is, and I think that, even like with the Old Testament, it's extremely important so that we don't make a lot of the mistakes that were made. We don't, I mean, look at what happened here in the US with, chattel slavery. They, instead of looking at, what was a black eye, on the civilization and world economy, instead of looking at it that way and progressing from it, they took it as, well, it's in there and justified, and so we can do it. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that we need to kind of approach it historically, as in what we can learn from it and the things that we can learn not to do, from it. So
this occurs to me for the first time hearing you say that. You know how the crazy cancel culture of today, which is for years I've said that this is like the Cultural Revolution in China. The PC social warrior types are just American versions of the Red Guard. They're trying to destroy the past to pretend it didn't exist so they can start something else new.
right.
And so they want to take down statues of Robert E. Lee and all that stuff. And it strikes me that we can't like Lincoln because he wasn't, his heart really wasn't in emancipation. He just had to do it. So he's no damn good at it. Martin Luther King, he's not good enough. And wait a minute. Don't you realize that things look different in different eras of history? And you naturally hope to progress and to see, like, what the heck were they doing back then? Well, now it's easier to see what was wrong, and that's the way it is in the Bible. Like these village atheist type critics of the Bible won't give this a break. If you're dealing with a bunch of Bronze Age ethics, the surprising thing is the advances they did make at the time. Now, of course, the problem is they're stuck with this idea that it's all verbally inspired and God told them everything. And then, I guess that means God commanded genocide and God gave rules for slavery. Well, that ought to be a big clue that it's not inspired in that way.
Right.
But if you, I did an article once called, "Is the Bible Mein Kampf?" Because a lot of skeptics and atheists and all that treat it as if it were, and that's absurd. And they're just the mirror image of what they were when they were fundamentalists. And you just got to realize this is a human book that has a whole lot of good stuff to deliver, and not surprisingly, some retrograde stuff that you would expect from the past.
Yeah, that's it. You made two fantastic points there. The first one is about the inspiration of Scripture. It's a lot of people don't even realize that they're holding to some type of dictation method, which is untenable. God used, if God is real and it is inspired, it doesn't mean that God guided the hand of the people that were writing. They wrote within the context of the time and certain people they were writing to about certain things. It doesn't mean it's applicable throughout all time. And that's, there are truths we can garner from it, but to say that, Scripture applies, all Scripture applies some kind of way to today is just nonsense. And that's how we end up with, a lot of things that we justify just in. To the other point with the looking at the historical atrocities and kind of making these outrageous claims about it, that's why it's called anachronism. That's why it's an anachronistic fallacy. We can't sit here in our individualistic Western culture and take just an English translation of thousands of year old material in different languages of a collectivist culture, and we're going to all of a sudden know exactly what it means just because it's been translated to our language. And that's a point I try to make even with Christians. Christians will do the same thing. It's like, wait a minute, we need to step back and we need to try to figure out how the people would have received it, who they were talking to, what they would have got from it. And then the last point on that was when you said the fundamentalists flip from one side to the other. And that's exactly, I don't make a distinction between Christian fundamentalists and atheist fundamentalists, because that's exactly what happens. They go from one extreme to the next. And it's like they go from this faith of accepting everything to now they won't accept anything.
And it's like a matter of faith not to. I once heard a guy at a secular humanist conference. He had been, I think, a Swedish Pentecostal pastor. Now he was an atheist. And he said what a liberating thing it was. He said, now I can say freely, I hate God. And I thought to myself, well, I thought you didn't believe in God. What's going on? Pathetic.
Yeah, and a lot of that is, really a product of fundamentalism, the indoctrination. I was, a fundamentalist as a young child at this, Southern Baptist Church. And I was never told, things to make me see everything is black and white, but the way that we were taught it was it's either this way or you're questioning God. It's either this interpretation, because to be a liberal Christian or a progressive Christian was worse than being an atheist. So they would throw it around as that's liberal doctrine, that's liberal preaching, and you can't be part of the lukewarm church. They're the worst, and it just all of these false ideas and theologies that they kind of, it's almost like an indoctrination, or it actually is an indoctrination. Yeah. And it's a hard mindset to break. Being a former fundamentalist, I could not for a long time find the gray area. It was always A or B, black or white. It was, and I'm sure you know who he is, but the one who actually helped me break that mindset was Hank Hanegraaff.
Huh.
I used to listen to Hank because I disagree with him, and got challenged and challenged and challenged. And then finally I was like, let me go back and look at this, and then it all just started to kind of like, it just exploded,
By the way, I must say about him, is Hank still with us? I can't keep it straight anymore. Who is and who isn't?
Yeah, he is. He got taken off the radio because it's a fundamentalist. Bot radio is the one who used to play him, and they are fundamentalists. And he converted to Eastern Orthodoxy, and they yanked his show. So he does it
Wow, I
all.
didn't even know that.
Yeah.
He and I were set up in a debate on some Christian, what the heck was it called? Lee Strobel, the Case for Christ guy.
Oh, yeah.
Had this show, and he had me and Hank debating over inerrancy. And I had tried to make clear as an example when we were talking about doing the show before it happened. I said that my approach to the Bible is critical in a scholarly way, but I don't have these carping things like when people say, oh, well, Jesus said that the mustard seed is the smallest of all seeds, and it isn't. So, so much for Jesus and all that. And I said, that's just ridiculous.
Right.
And no matter what you think of the Bible, if that's a problem, you got a bigger one. And but once, and they apparently tried to tell Hank, whom I had never met, that I held that view. I held this picky view, and he brought it up and said, I'm told that you think this. And I told him, no, I'm sorry, you've been misinformed. I said just the opposite. Well, he actually sent me a letter after that apologizing as if he had anything to apologize for.
Wow.
I was just impressed. And then he moderated a debate I had with James White a few years later. And by the way, I hear some people complain about James White, but I found him to be a commendable, broad-minded guy. I thoroughly enjoyed meeting him. And Hank was the moderator of it. And I just felt this guy is great. I really had I realized I was not in the theological ballpark he's in, but I was much impressed with him.
Yeah, his training was in like mnemonics and like memory. That's what he went to school. He didn't even have formal training. And he really had a huge impact on my deconstruction, because I went through an entire deconstruction, ended up being kind of agnostic for a short while. But he was, one of the things that really stuck with me about him was he repeated over and over, in the essentials, unity, non-essentials, liberty, and in all things, charity.
Amen.
He was so loving. No matter what fundamentalist called in and was, mean or arrogant towards him, he handled every single one of them in a compassionate, loving way. And I was like, I want to be like that, because I was the jerk fundamentalist, I hate to say it, I was a young earth creationist. And I mean, I bit off half the apple. It was
how are you to know any different though? In that setting,
right? But he is he does everything on. He has a YouTube channel and he does everything on there, and he is battling cancer. But he's just as gracious as he's always been. I'd actually heard someone else say that about James White, that he was actually a pretty cool guy and decent. And I'm just like, I can't stand 5-point Calvinists as much. I have more patience for new atheists than I do 5-point Calvinists. And he seems so arrogant sometimes. I'm just like,
Well,
Yeah.
I've only ever listened to a show where he was discussing me and my views, trying to prepare his audience to see the debate between us. And he would quote my stuff and tried to fairly represent me. I mean, I wasn't even there. This was just a show. And I thought, how often do you see somebody do that? And when I did get together with him for the debate, it was just so pleasant. In fact, I afterwards said, you know, we ought to get together for a regular show, a kind of point counterpoint show, where we would share different views on different issues, and then bring in people that who held different views on it, and we would grill them like they used to do on one of these shows on politics. And he never had time to do that.
Yeah.
But he was just really very friendly to me, and we laughed at stuff
That's good to
together.
know. Yeah, definitely. So, when you started writing about, say, I like the critical approach. I like, I had Dr. Carrier on my show, and and I told him I'm probably one of the few Christians that likes Dr. Carrier because one, I like Bayesian epistemology, and he approaches, historically with a Bayesian analysis. But it's a challenge. We can't be in echo chambers. We can't just, being a formal fundamentalist. I don't want to be, in a place where I'm not challenged. I don't, I'm not seeking justification for what I believe. I'm just accepting what I believe. So I thoroughly, enjoyed his work, and I've read a little bit of your stuff too. But when you started writing critically about that and publicly, how were you received? I mean, was it by like your peers because you can find hit pieces on anybody, and scholarship, but was it kind of a friendly reception or?
Well, I was never in any kind of prominent scholastic position. I was professor of religion at Mount Olive College, a small school here in North Carolina, for a few years before I went back to New Jersey to assume pastorate. But this is sort of a podunk school, and then I've had temporary teaching positions full time at like Drew University and Bergen Community College. I've taught in seminaries and so on, but never with a real classy, recognized sort of a berth. And I've been aware, like people like William Lane Craig in debates will cast me as a bit of a nut and so forth. But I've become good friends with several of the people I've debated, and like Greg Boyd and Bob Siegel, and I got along fine with them. Gary Habermas, a great guy. But in the Jesus seminar, I think I was accorded some respect, though some of my views, especially on Paul, were kind of laughed off by some of the fellows of the seminar. But I felt like I was pretty much accepted there. Most of the time, I don't get feedback from professionals. I know Craig Evans, in some review of a book of mine, dismissed me as a bitter ex-fundamentalist, which shows he's not. I mean, that's just an
doesn't know anything. Yeah, that's.
But that's unfortunate. But
yeah, I agree.
Bart Ehrman makes no secret of the fact that he thinks mythicists are sort of kooks. But when that's not the subject, he and I get along fine, and we respect each other. And so I have only bits and pieces to know what anybody out there thinks of me.
But that's okay. That's you just do your thing, and who cares? I mean,
one thing I will say, in all the debates I've done, and I'm not doing them really these days, but I did a whole mess of them a few years back. I virtually never had anybody get upset and try to fulminate against me. I have virtually never gotten any kind of spiteful negative feedback on the Bible Geek, even when I know most of the people are standard Orthodox evangelicals. I have been just pleasantly amazed that in the question and answer period, people appear to be genuinely curious about things they have never heard before. And that is so encouraging, because I'm not trying to convert them to anything. I don't care what they believe or don't. But it really says something good about these people. Oh, tell me more. And it's just the opposite of what you might expect.
Right. Hopefully that means the tide of fundamentalism's turning and people are actually using charity and trying to use critical thinking. So I hope it's a positive sign. Like you just said, and you had mentioned earlier about the apologetics. I'm not a fan of apologetics. I have spent most of my time in the philosophy of religion, and I've said the very same thing that you said. I'm not trying to convert anybody. I don't care what they think. Now, if they ask me why I believe, I will talk your ear off about it, but I don't beat people over the head with the Bible. I don't think that evangelism, the way that it's done by Protestants in the West, is even what evangelism is. I think more of the evangelism in the Bible was for spreading the church at the time. It's who in the U.S. hasn't heard about Jesus? What am I going to tell them that they don't know about Jesus? I mean,
have you heard of Jesus? Of course they have.
Yeah.
What do you think?
There's I'm pretty sure you probably don't get on TikTok, but there's this guy on TikTok who it's the same guy's voice. And there's all these crazy videos that they'll do where somebody's chasing a dog and the dog's running for his life. And he's like chasing him. Please let me tell you about my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. They'll do it with deer running and different things. And it's fantastic, because I totally relate to that. When they did at the church I was at, when they wanted to do the neighborhood outreach and go knock on people's doors, I was so uncomfortable. It's like, who wants you showing up at their home unannounced? Hey, we haven't seen you in church in a while. And that stuff just drove me crazy. So, and the more that I learned about it, the less I was convinced that's even what we're supposed to do. So, I'm with you there.
That'll learn what the lesson of Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. If you do evangelism like that, which I did for some years, what you're really telling them is, I'm a fanatic. Wouldn't you like to become one too?
Yes, spot on. I think all that we're supposed to do is live our life as stewards of the planet, stewards to people. And when somebody asks us why we do what we do, or what's our motivation or inspiration, you tell them about it. That's it. You do it through relationships. I mean, if you want to convert people, the only way to do it is to treat them like a human being, have a relationship with them, and then talk about these things. It's like walking in. That'd be like a Democrat walking into a Republican's home. Hey, let me get you over on our side. It's kind of, or the other way around. It's like, no, I'm good. So, but I want to talk a little bit about the fiction work that you do. I didn't even know when I was preparing for this, and I found all of that. I was like, that is fantastic. It's the website, what is it? Lovecraft. Yes. Yes. I stumbled across that website and some of the stories, and I was just like, wow, this is freaking cool, because I'm not a horror guy, but I am a psychological horror guy. When it's something that can be real, it's possible to happen, is when it's like horror to me. You got some big giant crazy outlandish alien or something like that, I'm just like, that's
a whole different thing.
So what got you into that? I mean,
I just when I discovered fantasy literature when I was in junior high, about 1966, I think. Um, I, uh, I first started reading the paperback reprints of Robert E. Howard's Conan stories, and shortly thereafter, a bunch of other stuff, including H.P. Lovecraft. And these guys were friends and correspondents, and both were major writers for the pulp magazine Weird Tales. And they both maintained a following, especially once their stuff was reprinted in the 60s. They wrote in the 20s and 30s. And this just really, both of them captivated my imagination. And Lovecraft had this gift for, he used an antique Poe-like style, but sort of made science fiction into horror, like Fritz Leiber, a great horror and science fiction writer himself. He said that Lovecraft had created a Copernican revolution in horror, so that the fearsome marvels of science replaced the supernatural as the thing that threatens a human-centered perspective and shows us our utter insignificance in the cosmic scheme of things. And yet, paradoxically, this is what Rudolf Otto described in the idea of the holy, that in the encounter with the numinous, there is this holy terror, as in Isaiah chapter 6, woe is me, I am undone. And Moses hid his face. He was afraid to look at God and all of this, because we realize our insignificance compared to the divine. And that's kind of what the monsters in Lovecraft represent. They're usually off stage. It's like someone makes the Faustian bargain of plumbing too deeply into ancient knowledge, and it's not so much the physical threat to him as the crushing realization that human beings are not the top of the ladder and never were, and so on. There's a real philosophical subtext to it, and the style is I don't know, it's just a fortuitous combination of these great gifts he had to make you think as well as feel, and feel by suggestion, and really great stuff. And so most of my horror fiction is in the Lovecraft vein. Most of my fantasy fiction is more like the Conan stuff of Robert E. Howard, and the derivative Thongor stories of Lynn Carter, and who was a friend of mine. So I just love writing stories. And some I've done, I have a collection I published called Horrors and Heresies.
Yeah.
Where
okay. I saw that. That was.
That's I just love doing that kind of stuff. You can, like parables, you can make points with narrative that you just can't make in discursive stuff. That, though I like doing that as well.
That's and that's a great point, because that's one of the things, when a lot of Christians talk about, like we were talking earlier about the literalism of the Bible and all of this. I'm like, wait a minute, you do know that there's a reason that there's parables from Jesus, right? It's a way to convey a point in a way that can be remembered. It's not, he's not like literally talking about these kind of things. It's like, hey, here is this poetic structure that is going to convey this, deep meaning and content. And sometimes it wasn't even really deep, it was, but it's in a way that it can be remembered, so when they, well, that's what Jesus said. And that's what Jesus said. I was like, wait a minute. Even if Jesus didn't say these things, they put them in parables in a way to convey the message. So the message is what's important, and that's what gets lost in a lot of it. But you also have you do a podcast over there on what is it, the Lovelace
Lovecraft. Yeah,
Lovecraft Ezine or Ezine or
the e-zine.
Ezine, yeah.
I used to have something to do with that, but I got canceled.
Oh,
Because of my more conservative political views, and these people are like the Red Guard, I was excommunicated from the Lovecraft conventions. Because of the talk I gave about how Lovecraft anticipated the anti-Western, anti-reason sort of a thing that is sweeping the West now. And oh boy, they told me I could well, they didn't tell me, they told somebody else who told me that they said I could never speak there again. Whereas I was one of the founders of it. And it's just, this was so funny. The same event, like they would give out an award, the Robert Bloch Award, once every biennial convention, the Necronomicon or convention.
right.
And I was the one who received it this time. But it was the same event that they as soon as it was over, basically excommunicated me. So I got an award and booted out by the same people, the same occasion. Just hilarious.
Yeah, it's crazy, the political environment that we have now. I mean, you can't. I hate when they call people on the left liberals.
They're not.
That's not a liberal. They're progressives. You know, they want to censor people. They want to use the government to censor people. They're not liberals. I'm a classical liberal. You know, I lean conservative on a lot of views, but I'm, you know, more of a classical liberal, you know, small government, low taxes, you know, we can help people out without, you know, having to have a bureaucracy to do it. And in the freedom of speech they don't understand is so important to the backbone of this country. It doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right. If we can't have, you know, peaceful dissent and we can't have our right to speak, then that is the first, you know, steps into oppression from the government. You can't garner support against, you know, an oppressive government if you can't talk about it. And
that's right.
I hate what's going on politically. It drives me insane that nobody seems to have common sense anymore. You know, you get labeled as you're either the right or the left. And if you're on the right, you're going to get censored, you know, more often than not. You know, unfortunately on the left, you're going to get, you know, labeled as the crazy progressives that are over there because they are like Nazis, man. They just want to shut everybody down if you don't agree with them. You know, it's like in philosophy, you know, that when somebody tells you, you know, stop imposing your ideas onto me or your beliefs. And it's like, then why are you imposing yours on me? Because that's exactly what they're doing. You know, it's like, it's so self-refuting, a lot of the positions that they have. So I hate to hear that, but it doesn't sound like it's really affected your career much. So it's probably their loss.
One thing that killed mine, though, was affirmative action. I've been told more than once that somebody else got a job because they had a racial quota. And in one of these cases, like this guy who was a native African, good guy, he was hired at a college that I was an adjunct at the time to teach African religions and Islam. Well, I was at a party from the department once, and this guy made a comment that, well, you know, Jews and Muslims really agree with each other more than with Christians because Muslims are like Jews. They don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. And I thought, are you kidding? Of course they do believe he's the virgin-born Messiah. They don't believe he's the Son of God. They don't believe he was crucified, but they sure believe he was the Messiah. How can this guy not know that? And he was hired to teach. Oh boy. So, but I don't wish it were otherwise. I have settled into an existence that I love. Like when I was full-time at this college down here, I loathed having to grade these terrible papers because the kids were not prepared for college level work. I hated these boring departmental conferences and all this crap. So I much prefer what I'm doing now. I don't know how. I just wish it hadn't given me such frustration there some years ago.
Yeah, I have some friends in philosophy who are professors of, some level or something, and we're in some, private groups, and it's the comments and posts on there about their students and some of the things that they receive is just, I'm just like blown away. I'm like, where did these people come from? How could you, there was one that the guy was, they literally copied the entire page of Wikipedia and turned it in as an assignment. And
I had stuff like that happen.
Oh yeah, I mean, didn't even put it in their own words. They just copied Wikipedia.
And often I had the impression students didn't know they weren't supposed to do that.
Oh man.
And I came to the point where I would tell my classes, I'm not assigning a research paper because I don't think you're capable of doing it. Not that you're stupid, you're all quite bright, but education up to this point has failed you, and it's just a useless exercise at this point.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to herd people through colleges to say, hey, we have this higher standard of education, and it's like we're trying to meet this to try to we're trying to be like number one in the world in college education or something, and they're just shoving people through. It's my kids. It's when my parents were in school, my dad used to complain about the grade percentages, what was an A, what was a B, what was a C. And now my kids, I'm like, that was an F when I was in school. That wasn't even passing. They've moved it down so low. And I'm just like, and then they even implemented a no zero policy where, yes, it didn't matter if you had unexcused absences. It didn't matter what happened. You couldn't get a zero. And it's like, and manipulating state numbers. That's all it's about, is manipulating the numbers for the state, the district, and that's what happens when you make a bureaucracy out of, something that was originally designed to be a local institution, to reflect the community, not the state, not the federal government. So, but we could go on and on about that. So I got one more question for you. Before you go, I got to know about the figurines.
I admit I am a lunatic. I started collecting superhero action figures and the like back in, I think, something like 1982. And then there's been a flood of them in recent years, better and better quality and variety and so forth. And then I got into customizing figures and getting friends to, nobody's made a figure of this character. How about if you make one? And I met these very talented people that should be working for the toy companies. Some of them eventually did. And then I got into doing it, not as well, but I just find it fascinating. My wife's driven crazy by it, and I'm trying to rein myself in. But I just find them inspiring and fascinating, and it somehow brings the characters from movies and comic books into a 3D tangible existence. I think all of my life since I was a kid, I think that was the key to it, that they're somehow realer to me if they're in three dimensions. But I just love them. And I've got well, here in my study, I've got loads of them on the bookshelves, but I have 2 whole rooms upstairs filled with hundreds of them in different scenarios and dioramas and so forth. And I'm now giving loads of them away to friends because it really is out of control, but I just absolutely love them.
That's, you know what, I am totally happy and stoked to know that and see that, because one of the things I miss about when I was a kid was I had He-Man.
Yeah.
And I had the wrestlers and stuff, and now I see them today and they have like 15 joints on them that move, and I'm like, that'd be so cool. But I'm a grown man, I can't, so, but I do love the figurines myself. So it's I'm kind of compulsive about things, so I haven't really got into that because I can't, I'll go crazy. Like you, I'll have them everywhere. I'll be customizing them and doing everything else. So I'm glad you're normalizing that for grown men. I really appreciate that.
Well, are you sure you wouldn't like me to send you a box of them?
Oh, you're tempting me now.
Yeah, go ahead. You shall be as gods.
Absolutely. That's some fun times right there. I think I spend enough time in my studio as it is already.
Well, let me know, because I have a bunch to get rid of, and they're in good shape. They're loose figures. I mean, not in the packaging, but various superheroes and so on.
Yeah, I think they look right good on the wall. Put a little shelf back there.
Yeah. So send me your mailing address.
Oh, absolutely. I will not turn down the offer for free figurines.
All right. You're helping me out here. Thanks.
Oh, that's okay. It was a ploy. You gotta clean house and get something out of there. Oh, that's fantastic. Dr. Price, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out with me.
Oh, what a delight. Anytime. Yeah.
I've seen you on so many shows. You're such a character. I absolutely love watching the shows that you're on, like with Derek all the time. It's you seem to love life like I do, and I'm pretty energetic myself too, so I have to suppress myself quite a bit when I'm on here, but thank you so much for coming on. I'm gonna send you to the backstage so I can wrap it up, and I will be back there with you in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
All right. There you go, Dr. Price. Man, that was fantastic. I love that conversation. I love Dr. Price. He is a great character. He loves to have fun, and I was excited and looking forward to this show because I knew it was going to be, not your typical mundane, just question and answers. Not that any of my other guests were. They were fantastic too. But before I go, as always, I'd like to give credit to Pasta Mike at Normalizing Atheism for all of the intros, the outros, all of the logos, thumbnails. He does everything that he can for me. He's a fantastic guy. Check him out. Normalizing Atheism on YouTube, and he has a discussion group on Facebook. And thank you guys for watching, and I will see you on the flip side.